Yeah, started.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee today. I'm Councillor Kuna, the Chair of the committee. Just to notify you that the meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube channel. And members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are exempt or confidential items. Second item on the agenda is the appointment of new members of the committee. So we have Justine Lomas to replace Adam Harding. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
As Roman Catholic Diocese representative, and we've got Simon Morrell, Councillor Simon Morrell. Welcome to the committee. Replacing Councillor Sadak Mir for the period ending the annual general meeting of the council for May 2022. So apologies. So we've received apologies from Sarah Smith, Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Scott for today's meeting. Any other apologies? No? Okay, lovely. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest for today's agenda? No? Thank you very much.
I do have a matter of urgent business I'd like to raise at the end of the agenda, and okay. I can end with it.
Okay, thank you. Action notes and action tracker. So have members managed to look through the action notes and the action tracker? Are we content with the updates on the action tracker? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Yip.
Thank you. Again, there's a number of outstanding actions on the update. So I refer to page 18 of 58. There's a couple of things we said is just awaiting information. Perhaps we could just ask for a chaser on it. So page 19 of 58, we're waiting for information by the next meeting. And additional information, etc.
Is that the send agenda?
Yes, and the one before as well. But
yes,
for that just to be followed up and noted and actioned in between meetings, please.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Yip. So item 6 on the agenda is the CSE child sexual exploitation item. So Councillor Thompson was going to join us. So I don't know if she's delayed in transit, but we are joined by Claire Graham, I believe, who is the head of service for contextual safeguarding. Are we being joined by anyone else for this item?
No, just Claire. Just Claire.
Okay, so we've got Claire online. Welcome to the meeting, Claire. So I'm going to hand over. We're going to hand over to you for this item, and then we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay. So, good morning, guys. Pleasure to be here. My name's Claire Graham. I'm the head of service for contextual safeguarding based at Birmingham Children's Trust. I've been invited here to give a briefing and an update around child sexual exploitation. So just a quick reminder, really, that child sexual exploitation, you know, the impact of it is quite devastating and has a real devastating impact on children, young people and their families. And it's a largely hidden crime, and raising awareness of this type of abuse is essential to preventing it and stopping it really early when it does happen. The impact for our children is that it causes physical, sexual, emotional trauma and can lead to poor mental health, substance misuse, and even on some occasions, suicide. The impact absolutely devastates families, siblings, and communities. In terms of looking at the council's role in tackling child sexual exploitation, I revert back to the report going back into December 2014, where there were 19 recommendations in total from that report. But on this slide shows a summary of the recommendations, and I felt that it was pertinent to what we're working at within Birmingham Children's Trust. So a summary of the recommendations at that particular time was around the delivery of training and awareness raising on child sexual exploitation, and that should not just be focused on the council, but really it should be multi-agency across the whole range of partnerships who are working to safeguard and protect children. In addition to that, we needed some awareness raising around child sexual exploitation that included parents and carers. There were some barriers, it was felt, within that report towards disclosures around Black and ethnic minority children. We also needed to develop some resilience in the communities around the understanding, the identification, the responses needed in respect of child sexual exploitation. And also our educational provisions also needed to be better, more aware of spotting the signs. In the report, it talked about ensuring better use of Care First to record and analyse and share CSE cases, ensuring that the reports were dynamic and could be generated. So what we've got at the moment in terms of the local current position in relation to that 2014 report is that we do now have a specialist service within Birmingham Children's Trust. The Empower You Exploitation and Missing Hub went live in October 2019. It brought together the missing service and the exploitation service and joined it up as a partnership. But in addition to that partnership, we have a range of partner agencies either co-located with us or located virtually that make up that service provision. It's a specialist service, and it doesn't just look at sexual exploitation, it looks at criminal exploitation, children who have been exploited into county lines, exploited into serious youth violence, exploited into gangs, as well as sexual exploitation. We do now have in-house and multi-agency training, and have done since 2014 and perhaps even before that, but even more widely now, I would say, the in-house and multi-agency training and awareness around child sexual exploitation doesn't just include child sexual exploitation physically, also looks at online abuse and includes hospitality, staff being educated around that, educational provisions being educated around that, as well as we are out in the communities raising awareness around that too. We have a parent carer awareness raising, and we have Parents Against Child Exploitation, and we also are utilising our parents as safeguarding partners in the fight against exploitation. We are developing exploitation in the community, and that is in line with the council's localism agenda. So empowering back the community to take back their streets and their businesses and what's happening in their communities, their localities, their green spaces, their parks. We are working with the community to build awareness raising around this agenda. We have an equalities forum that looks at cultural competence and anti-racism awareness, and we are looking at the adultification of our children, and in addition to that, the barriers as to why Black and ethnic minority children are being missed in terms of the identification of CSE, and we're really educating our staff around that. We will recognise that more work is required in terms of the barriers to Black and ethnic minority children, that we do need to continue to raise and work in an anti-racist way and be culturally competent and recognise across the whole partnership. So it's not just Birmingham Children's Trust, it's West Midlands Police, it's health services, it's hospital services, probation, youth offending services. We need to recognise the adultification of children and how children are often seen as perpetrators, and we want to change that concept and be seen as victims, because they are victims first. We no longer have Care First, but we do have a new children's social care recording system that has replaced Care First, and it does have the ability to pull out records, and it is quite a dynamic system. It's still in its infancy in terms of exploitation, but the method and model of what can happen within that system is there, and it's just for us to work it out, build the forms to be able to create that space to be able to look at what information we can pull from that system, but it is a very dynamic system. In terms of the governance, we have a contextual safeguarding strategic board. We have an implementation board that feeds into the strategic board. We have us, which is the Empower You Exploitation and Missing Hub, and we have a number of commission services based on need and demand in terms of what we understand the profile of Birmingham to be in terms of child exploitation sexually and criminally, and we can commission services based on need and demand in particular areas. This is a little bit around local data. So this is what we are able to pull out in terms of local data. We collect data on children sexually and criminally exploited. We are able to say how many agencies are making referrals to us around that. And we are also able to see how many referrals and assessments and strategy discussions and child protection inquiries are undertaken stemming from those concerns. We are also able to drill that data down to the ages, the gender, the ethnicity, whether there are any special educational needs or disabilities. We can drill it down to area in terms of the children exploited. And currently, we could say the youngest child that is being exploited at the moment, I had age 14, but actually I looked at one yesterday and it was at age 10. But they are usually between the ages of 15 and 17. And that age group tends to increase, and that we tend to have more females than males being sexually exploited. And in terms of ethnicity, there are more children from a white background than a black and ethnic minority background in terms of child sexual exploitation. We see a big difference when it comes to criminal exploitation. It is predominantly boys and it's predominantly black boys that we're seeing. So some of the emerging issues around the National Child Sexual Abuse Exploitation Independent Inquiry that came out in February 2022. The scope around that inquiry was to take some areas, around 6 areas, and to look at 8 themes. And the areas that they looked at was Durham, Swansea, Warwickshire, St Helens, Tower Hamlets and Bristol. There were 8 themes that were examined in each area. They looked at problem profiling and the disruption of child sexual exploitation. They looked at the empathy and concern for these victims. They looked at risk assessment, protection from harm and outcomes. They looked at children who went missing and return home interviews, and children in care. They looked at male victims because they appear to be missing a lot from CSE, and even in Birmingham, we have a very low number of male victims, and we're questioning ourselves as to why are we not identifying that boys can actually be victims of CSE and putting that in our awareness raising. Children with disabilities, because we know that they're even more vulnerable to exploitation. Partnership working and audit review and performance improvement. The key findings from this inquiry, albeit a very academic debate, was around really the definition of child sexual exploitation, including the concept of exchange and whether it is necessary to be present in an individual case of sexual abuse in order for it to meet the criteria for child sexual exploitation. The word exchange involves that a child is receiving something that they need and want, and that suggests that children have a choice about their own exploitation. So within Birmingham at the moment, we're looking at changing that definition. We had a meeting with the Violence Reduction Unit yesterday at our Child Exploitation and Missing Strategic Board, where we discussed the definition with the regions as well, because what we understand is that Birmingham can make changes, but what we would want for some consistency is for all the regions to make the changes as well, and what that change should look like. We also understand that there are heightened vulnerabilities to child sexual exploitation, in particular if children are in residential care, and in particular when children are placed out of the local authority area, so placed out of Birmingham, actually raises that vulnerability. In addition to that, the presence of a disability, and we're doing some work around that too. We recognise that there's a national shortage of suitable residential care placements for children who are at risk of or have experienced child sexual exploitation, and again, some work needs to be done at a higher level around what we do about that. We know that children missing from home and school is a key indicator of exploitation. Within the hub, we have workers that will go out and debrief with those children as to what has occurred whilst they've been missing. They will visit children, they will provide some brief intervention, they will look at safety planning and strategies to reduce and prevent exploitation and identify any safeguarding. And again, male victims is there again. So just in response to policing and the criminal justice system, we recognise that the police do have problems in terms of problem profiling perpetrators of CSE. Their data is not really sufficient in terms of the ethnicity, age, gender, and the profiling. And they've recognised and acknowledged that there is a lack of information on perpetrators groups, and there's a lack of information on ethnicity of victims and alleged perpetrators, and they need to do some work around that. The inspection and audit review was a themed inspection, all identified areas for improvement, but the focus on joint inspections has shifted to wider issues of criminal exploitation and child neglect. And we think within Birmingham, because our numbers should be more than what they are of children identified at risk of child sexual exploitation, we think we've shifted so far across to looking at children exploited that maybe we've took our eye off the ball in terms of child sexual exploitation, and we need that balance because there are children out there that are being exploited, and we need to continue to identify those children. So in terms of recommendations, these are the six recommendations that are there in terms of strengthening the criminal justice response, in terms of enhancing the child exploitation disruption toolkit and providing awareness around that for practitioners, because when it first launched, there was no awareness raising around it. We were given a document, a toolkit to use, but no awareness raising. So we're looking forward to the enhanced version of that and some awareness raising. Looking at some government guidance around CSE, looking at reviewing the categorisation of risk and harm within Birmingham Children's Trust and across the regions, continuing to enhance our data and problem profiling across the whole partnership group, and looking really at unregulated placements and whether it is sufficient for our children, where there are risks or vulnerabilities to CSE to be placed in those types of placements. So the next steps for Birmingham, I think this might be my last slide, is to look at the overarching partnership child exploitation strategy. It's underway, it's in draft at the moment, and it will include communication, multi-agency awareness raising, inclusive of hospitality trade and licensing, and in particular we're looking at taxis and Uber taxis, and with hospitality we're looking at hotels, Airbnbs, which is even more harder to regulate, but we know that our children are being exploited in Airbnbs, guest house and apartments. We will continue to develop the information sharing and the problem profiling, and that's not just about us, that's about our partners too. We will continue to raise awareness in the community linked with the localism agenda. We will continue to work and build confidence, trust with parents and carers to utilise them as our safeguarding partners. Our Birmingham Children's Trust Hub operational model will be within the strategy, and we also within the strategy will have things around accommodation and relocation and what that process and pathway should look like for children, not just at risk in placement, but also at risk in the community, threats to life and things like that. We will be reviewing our CSE definition in line with the region. We will be reviewing our risk assessment, risk matrix in line with the region too. And I hope I haven't gone over time.
Thank you very much, Claire. That was a very in-depth presentation, so thank you for that. Members, does anyone have any questions? I've got a few. So first, Councillor Morell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Claire, for the presentation. First committee, so I really apologise in advance if I'm preaching to the choir with anything I've said. I really don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, but this is something I care deeply about because where I represent, and frankly, is right on the border. We have a massive problem with counter-line drug gangs and a lot of grooming, and often with that, people often talk about the young boys that are being groomed to sell the drugs, and people often overlook the female element as well. We had back in, I think, 2018, big problems in South Birmingham with gangs, and there was one school in particular, an all-girls school, I'm not going to name it publicly for obvious reasons, where there was lots of grooming taking place, where they were basically just showing up outside the school, picking these girls up, and parents felt quite powerless, actually, because they thought that nothing was actually being done about it. So reports like this are very welcome. Perhaps you could educate me as a councillor on the counter lines about the recommendation to child exploitation disruption toolkit. I would like to know a bit more about that, and what proactive measures are the council taking to not just spot the signs, but actually intervene and prevent that from happening.
So the Home Office. Oh, sorry. Did you want me to answer?
If you just respond to Councillor Morell, then I've got a question as well.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Morell. This is something that's very close to my heart as well, having lived experience around this myself, and obviously my children also being victims of serious youth violence. But the Home Office Disruption Toolkit is a Home Office Disruption Toolkit, so it's online. It's something that we use when we're holding disruption planning meetings, because what we recognise is often we will identify a child who's been exploited. We will put in the necessary support in terms around victim support, counselling, therapy, trauma-informed practice, diversionary tactics, but actually the perpetrators just move on to abuse other children. So the Home Office Disruption Toolkit there is a number of measures in there that we can utilise and make reference to when we're thinking about disruption of perpetrators, such as serving corns on particular perpetrators, orders, police, legal forces and orders and civil orders that we can use. It's not actually our toolkit, but it's a Home Office one that we make reference to when we're looking at disruption of perpetrators, around what orders that we can utilise to disrupt the perpetrators and kind of make their life a living hell.
Could I ask Claire that you share a copy of that toolkit with the committee, because I think that would be useful for us to see exactly what the content of that is. And a number of us work with children, and I personally have worked with victims of CSE with my community hat on. So I've got a number of questions, but before I come in, Councillor Jenkins, do you have a question you wanted to raise?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Claire. That was really interesting. And just a couple of points to pick up on really are, we've been talking about CSE in this committee for, I don't know, probably 10 years. But I just wonder whether you could give us some examples of how the awareness in the community, what work is actually being done, has been undertaken already and is planned, just about that raising awareness work. And also with all of the recommendations, which contain lots of really important things, but is there any timeline for any of that to be implemented?
So the first question, we have chosen an initiative, and we've chosen the Lozells and the Newtown area because what we recognise from the data problem profiling of that area is that it is the second largest place where County Lines is running out of is Lozells and Newtown. So we know that a lot of our children are being groomed and exploited into county lines and criminal exploitation in that area, and there is also a lot of serious youth violence. So we started our initiative in the Lozells and Newtown area. We've done a number of community profiling walks. We've been able to build a parent and carer group within that area of parents and carers that come from that area, where we have trained them on CSE and CE awareness, so exploitation of children criminally and sexually, and also what to look for and the indicators, and also how to advocate and how to empower the community to recognise these and take steps to address those issues. It's a long journey, because from April till now, we were able to take 40 parents and carers away on a residential this weekend. Parents and carers who have either lost children through murder, parents and carers who have had their children seriously harmed, parents and carers whose children are being exploited or have been exploited, parents and carers whose children are been exploited and groomed into gangs. And on that residential, we were able to even do some more in-depth training and awareness and work around trauma as well. And it's taken from last April till now to build that trust and confidence with those parents. And then what we're doing is training them to enable them to go out into the community to train the community. So it's starting, and it's hard work and it's very challenging because parents do not trust us as professionals, and we've had to work really hard to build that trust and confidence and honesty with them, and they've got their own parent and carer groups. We've also working with a number of community interest companies who also provide awareness raising to parents and carers around indicators, around how to respond, around evidence gathering, around intelligence gathering, and around spotting the indicators. So we're also working with a number of community interest companies that do that too. So I hope that's answered question 1. And just remind me of question 2 again, sorry.
Yeah, Claire, it was just on the timelines for the recommendations.
So we're just literally just putting together, the recommendations came out in February, we're just in March, so we're putting together that timeline of the short-term, long-term measures around how we can meet those recommendations. Some of them will be quick wins. So things like the child sexual exploitation definition, it's been discussed with the regions. We'll come back next month to discuss, you know, actually what do we want to say for the definition? What is our agreed definition for consistency across the 7 regions? And that will be a quick win. There's things in there that won't be so quick. Things like the government guidance around CSE, you know, that's kind of above us. Things like unregulated placements and things like that. We know that those things are going to take a lot longer. So we haven't actually got things in timeline yet, but we are looking at what we can do really quickly to make things happen really quickly. And the longer term ones are not just for Birmingham Children's Trust, they are for other partners too. So for example, housing need to get involved in terms of commissioning housing. We need placements, we need Ofsted involved around the semi-supported accommodations and unregulated placements. So I guess it's timelines that are not just for Birmingham Children's Trust, and that there's always going to be something that we have to do, but it's about a partnership approach and getting all those partners around the table to look at what they can do within specific timelines.
Thank you very much for that, Claire. Councillor Errol?
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire. That was a wonderful presentation. Obviously, it's a very upsetting topic. It's clear that you know how to identify the people who are at risk of CSE. You mentioned white girls 15 to 17 in care and in care homes, and who are missing from school and home. Obviously, it'd be great if we could stop the exploitation from happening before it even starts. I wondered what more could be done to work with these this group that you've identified as being most at risk, to prevent it from ever happening, educating them and empowering them to, you know, say no and want a different path for themselves.
So for me, there's something about, we know what the vulnerabilities are. We know if there's adverse childhood experiences, there's exclusions, there's SCN needs, we know what the vulnerabilities are. We know the age groups that people usually start to want to groom children, and I guess it's getting younger and younger now because we've got online grooming and our children are online on social media platforms at very early ages. So we know what the vulnerabilities are. So for me, it's about starting really early with the preventative work. So it's about the early help, and we do have an early help service within Birmingham that is working really well in educational provisions, looking at tackling school exclusions, because we know that's an additional vulnerability. But really, we want to really tighten up that, and I don't know whether you've got anybody coming in from early help, because they may talk about this, but we really need to get in a lot earlier, educating parents a lot earlier, educating children a lot earlier, identifying them earlier, because we know what the vulnerabilities in, and doing that preventative work to stop things from escalating where we're now involved and things are quite entrenched. And for the girls that it's quite entrenched with, it's about building their self-esteem, getting them to recognize that what is happening to them, because often they think that these perpetrators love them and care for them. So it's about really being our team and our team of social workers and our partners really being consistent with these children, turning up, showing up, educating them, getting some awareness raising with them around, you know, what is actually happening them, and then diverting them and finding them other opportunities to divert them from that. So we've got two lots of work that we need to be doing that's running alongside each other. It's the preventative work, and then it's when they are entrenched and involved, supporting them to get out of that. And we have a number of community interest companies as well as our partner agencies that are supporting in that type of work.
Councillor Morrell, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I think that was a brilliant point about education, but also in terms of educating these young girls and young boys. Also, we also need to think about the blackmail and the threats. I don't want to say anything too publicly, and I hate it when the media reports this stuff, because I always feel like you're basically advertising the methods to people. But a lot of these young people are living in fear that if they were to come out and speak about what's happening to them, that their family and their loved ones, especially if we've identified people in care, You know, a lot of these people in care, they have siblings as well who are also in care, and they fear if they say anything, they'll be taken away from their loved ones. And I think on the educational front, we need to really get that message through to these people that there is support there, and the threats, most of them are idle. And I think that's really a challenge. Maybe you can explain, you know, how do we tackle that challenge of actually breaking down those barriers so that they understand that there is support there and they will be looked after. Because I think that's also why a lot of people fear coming forward.
Yeah, you know, it's very challenging. We myself and Epiphany People, who is a community interest company that works with parents whose children have been exploited, who go missing and are in gangs or are gang associated or living, as I say, in gang impacted environments, because I don't believe that children choose to be in gangs. It's very challenging. We did a video reaching out to parents video. We asked for it to be shown across all the schools via the VRU. We asked for it to be shown in GP waiting rooms. We asked for it to be just flooded across every network that it could be, to that if a parent is sitting in a GP surgery in a waiting room, they see this video come up, they understand that it's not about blame, shame, guilt. We understand fear. We understand what's happening to our children, but that we are here to help. And it's hard because especially as social services, there's already a stigma attached to us, and people don't trust statutory services and they don't trust the police, which is why our community work, going into the community, reaching into the community, listening to the community, is helping to build that trust even more. And we just have to, I mean, we're doing it in Lozells and Newtown. We would really want to do it across the whole of Birmingham. We just don't have the resources and the people power and the financial resources to do that yet. And it's kind of like an initiative at the moment. But ideally, what we would want to see is that replicated across the whole of the city, where there are these parent carers group that are run by parent carers, that we're empowering the community, that we've built trust and confidence, that they can come to us, that they can tell us things without fear of having their children removed, to break down those barriers and those myths and those stereotypes that surround statutory agencies and services. So we've got the video. We did the video I'm sure we did it last year, and I have seen it on the VRU website. And some people have come up to me and said, some of the parents, oh, I've seen you on the TV. So I know it's out there, but it's about finding different platforms and ways to tell our parents and carers and our communities that we understand blame, guilt, shame, fear. We know what's happening to your children. We know you're scared. We know that you're not just scared of what's happening to your kids, but you're scared of us as authorities, but we are here to help. And it's about just keep on getting that message out.
Thank you, Claire. I've got a number of questions as well. So a lot of the questions I was going to ask have been asked by members, so I'm going to just leave all of those out. But one of the things that I'm really keen on, so I've worked with victims of child sexual exploitation on ways. Some of them were exploited online. I did have a young girl who had a disability and she was being groomed by a gang, and it was all done via phones and getting her to go to various locations and things. Then I had another girl who'd been exploited from the age of 10, and when she came to me, she was 18, so she'd been exploited most of her life, and she went into the care system, but she just felt that she didn't connect. One of the things that, and so I'm a co-founder of a community organisation, but one of the things that we did is we delivered workshops to parents. So I know you're saying you go out and you go talk to schools, but my thought on that is that's brilliant, and you know, the more work that we can get out there in terms of prevention, the better. But the children who are stuck in that rut are the ones that might be seeing that video. So the people that they might need to support them are their parents. So I think it would be really good to understand. So you've talked about a number of organisations have been commissioned to raise awareness and support parents, etc., to understand what work is being done, but also as elected members. If someone comes to us, I know I work in the sector, so I know, but I'm sure there's other elected members who would like to know that if a child came to them that was being exploited, who do they go to?
Yeah,
I would think the main thing that you would think of going to was the police, right? I'm sure many people don't know that the council have a service for that, but also it's about working in silos. So you talk about resources. we've got the VRU unit as well. And so how are you working with other statutory partners in terms of trying to raise awareness, I suppose, and pool your resources to get the word out there? Because I think prevention is brilliant that you're doing all this work in terms of reactive work and trying to educate people, but I think not enough education is happening, in my opinion. I have never ever in my ward seen a workshop by the council. I don't know if other elected members have. So you say you've gone to one area, but Birmingham is a very, very large area. It's much bigger than just Lizelle.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know what you're proposing to do throughout the city to raise awareness with elected members. You know, could you deliver a workshop? Perhaps we all have workshops that are delivered to us as elected members, where we're educated as members, as you know. So if a family came up to us, where do we signpost them? I tried really hard with one young girl that I was supporting. She had the phone numbers of gangs of people that were exploiting her. I tried to give that phone to the police, and the number of times I called to try and give that number, because that was information, and I couldn't get the police to come and pick that up from me. So I think there are still huge gaps in terms of the service that we need to, you know, bridge those gaps. But we need to get the word out there in terms of what are the methods that are being used. Tell the parents what signs do they need to look out for. Tell elected members who do they signpost people to. Services that were commissioned, what are those services doing? Where are they delivering? How are they delivering? How can we tap into those services as elected members if they've been commissioned? So it would be useful to have all of this information shared with us as elected members.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned about taxi drivers. What are you doing with the taxi drivers? Because something that was brought to my attention is some taxi drivers have blacked out windows. So if there's a child in the back of that taxi where a window is blacked out, how does that child kind of raise awareness that they're uncomfortable? How do people see the visibility of that child who's been exploited that might be in the back of a taxi? Yeah. So I know there's lots of different aspects of it, but
no, thank you.
Share the information with the committee, because I think that would be really useful and actions going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's important to note that this is not a Birmingham Children's Trust or a Birmingham City Council's only agenda. So it's a whole partnership. It's not just Birmingham Children's Trust and Birmingham City Council. So you've got people like Community Safety Partnerships, who we work in partnership with as well, that we've actually asked around the taxi drivers and linking mandatory awareness raising around exploitation, linking it to their license, that they have to undertake certain training and linking it to their license. So that's what we've proposed. Community Safety Partnerships will work on those types of things, as well as they will work on safer travel. So there's I guess exploitation is so huge that no one organisation can do this. So it's about us coming together. So in terms of I work really closely with the Violence Reduction Unit. We work in partnership together, and some of the workshops that you was just talking about can actually be done by the Violence Reduction Unit to elected members and within different parts of the city, because they are a holistic. They have community navigators, they have educational navigators across the whole of the city, delivering workshops around awareness raising for exploitation in educational provisions, in youth centres, and that can be done very, very easily. But I just think it's important for me to note that it's not just Birmingham Children's Trust, it's a whole partnership. And we cannot do this in isolation. So we do have those wider partnership arrangements that can also support Red Thread, whether that be in the hospitals, providing awareness raising to hospital staff, providing awareness raising to GP surgeries. It's a whole partnership approach where we tap into each partner agency to be able to deliver on some of the aspects that you've just mentioned, Councillor.
So would you be able to commit to coming to some of the elected members, raising awareness with elected members and sharing some of the commission services so that we can try and tap into them to get into our wards?
What I can commit to is having a discussion with the Violence Reduction Unit, the director there, and alongside her getting her staff in to, and I could accompany them as well to deliver some of those workshops. That's a definite yes.
Fantastic, thank you. We're also joined by Councillor Francis, our cabinet member. I don't know, Councillor Francis, would you like to add a few words to the presentation?
Yeah, it's just an observation really, and you usefully picked up on some things I was going to make comment on. But it's pleasing to hear, of course, what's going on in Lascelles and Aston, for example, with that targeted geographical area. But the reality is exploitation is going to exist in that very confined space, citywide issue. And certainly I think we need to identify resources, both with ourselves as council and in partnership with the Children's Trust, to make sure that we've got that citywide coverage. And I think we really need to take advantage of our recently launched digital strategy to make sure that the various networks from adults, parents, carers, young people, children, all the way down to the early years have an appropriate way of accessing that information. And I think that I feel really strongly that this should be a priority for this group next year, because it's likely to be exacerbated with the sort of churn that we're going to see in this city with the arrival of refugees, seekers from Ukraine, whereby people can open their houses. And
that's right.
Coming in and live with us. So I think we need to take that sort of pledge and action now.
Yeah, and also, I would like to see that as one of your recommendations as well, because that's, although we talk about reactive work in the recommendations, there's not proactive work in the recommendations. So I think that should be in there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also the other point I want to make, Claire, I know we're running, so be very quick with this. So you highlighted that there's more people from a white background, your children from a white background that have been exploited. Do you think that honour plays a bit a part in the lack? Could it be that there's a lack of reporting from ethnic minorities due to honour? Because I know conversations that I've had and work that I've done, when I've delivered a workshop, I had a jam-packed room full of parents that wanted to know about CSE and what signs to look out for, and the majority of that room were from a BME background. So that was an observation that I made. So do you think honour plays a part in the lack of reporting rather than a lack of the issue existing within BME communities?
I think that definitely is a factor, but I also think another factor is around cultural competence of practitioners as well, and their ability to be able to distinguish between adolescent teenage behaviour in a black and ethnic minority child and that to a white child. I think there's definitely some awareness raising that continues to be needed around cultural competence and understanding anti-racism practice. I also do think that our black and ethnic minority groups don't have trust in the system, so won't report. I also believe that there are things around shame and dishonour. That's not a term I like to use, but I believe that there are issues and barriers. The other issues that I believe that there are issues around our newly arrived families and our children and families with no recourse to public funds. Some people don't want to bring any attention, statutory, police or children's services onto their families, and not probably have an understanding about what's happening to their child, but don't want that kind of focus on their family because they think it might bring other problems. So I think there are numerous reasons why we see a lack of black and ethnic minority children being identified for sexual exploitation, but it's different for criminal exploitation, where we're seeing a number of black boys in particular, as well as Asian boys, being identified as criminally exploited. But I think they're being picked up more so because they're more visible, whereas sexual exploitation is not always so visible. If it's online and things are happening, it's not so visible. But for definite county lines and trafficking drugs, we're seeing our children being taken from here to Dundee via coaches, via hire cars, and when they're stopped by British Transport Police, they're more visible, and so we're seeing more black boys in that area. But definitely there are some issues around cultural competence, around understanding and recognizing race and how that plays, and values and culture and how that plays a part in the identification of CSE. And Shane.
Thank you very much, Claire. And thank you very much for that presentation and the commitment, and also from the Cabinet member as well, because I think that would be welcomed by members and parents across Birmingham. So thank you very much for coming to the meeting today. So our next update is a youth service update, and we're joined by Ilgun Yusuf, Demi Loach, Victor Agbontine, and Jodiel Millwood. So if you'd like to take a seat around the table. Thank you very much. Ilgun, are you going to start the presentation, or?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Just get my voice back. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ilgun Yusuf. I'm the Acting Assistant Director for Skills and Employability, where the youth service is part of the portfolio. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity today to come back with a follow-up to some of the questions that were raised last time. As you will know, we submitted a written report and would like to talk to it from it. We've also got colleagues from the youth service today, and indeed users of the youth services that we'll be focusing on today. I think the key thing to say is just if I may just pick up on what was said earlier in the previous item, is that we are very much taking this view, and you heard Claire talk about an early intervention approach and looking at the whole journey and narrative of that young person and a personalised approach. So very much following on from what was said from the Cabinet member, there is definitely work to be done in terms of securing more resource from various sources nationally and so forth. But we are absolutely, as part of that early intervention and prevention, we are absolutely plugged into that in terms of taking that forward. And in due course, we look forward to the opportunity of coming back and reporting on that. The next step is to join that up in terms of that strategy. In terms of today, I thought it might be useful if Sula just takes us through the report, and then because actually we've got a fantastic story, and then maybe take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Do members of the committee have any questions for Ilgun? We've had information that's been shared with us. Does anyone have any questions?
Sula's going to take us through that now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, just to say it's nice to see you in the flesh, finally. First time it's actually met you, Bev. What are the Teams meetings?
Thank you.
No question.
Chair, I will have some questions, but can we have the Sula's?
Yes. Thank you.
Over to me, yep. Hello, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Sula. I'm head of Birmingham Youth Service. I'm going to go briefly through the report, but I brought some colleagues along with me that's going to expand and kind of give you a little bit more than just words on paper and what it feels like for them as well. So the report, we're coming back to scrutiny. So what the report is concentrated on some of the key areas that were raised before. And so I'm going to start off by kind of looking at youth service communication, and particularly social media that was raised. I hope everyone can hear me. Is that all right? Yep. Yes. Around social media that was raised, and perhaps our presence wasn't as active. Since then, we have dedicated a lead, a member of staff that's looking at social media and making sure that each centre has some active participation on social media. And we're focusing at the moment on Instagram and young people rather than professionals, because we have a Twitter account. It's not great, and we know that needs to be worked on, but we're focusing on the Instagram account. We're also looking at a youth service website, and we've got a volunteer working with some of the staff over at one of the centres who has media and marketing background and is looking at that as well. We're also looking at branding our centres as safe spaces for young people. And that fits in at the end of that conversation that I heard with Claire, because we work closely with Claire, around where do young people know where to go as being safe. So we're quite keen to actually brand our centres, not only as youth centres, but actually say, this is somewhere for young people to come to and listen to. So that will also promote the service, but also make it really relevant to young people. And as part of that branding, we're working actually with Claire and her team and actually going out filming next week about doing a very short piece around the youth service being there to listen to young people. And we've got some research that says, you're not listening to us. We're branding it as, this is somewhere safe for you. We are listening. We are here for you. So they're the kind of things that we're doing. The very last bit that I just quickly say on that one as well is that we've started, I know I sent a link and it may have been really late. I don't know, can we show that link? So this is a piece that we have done, I think it's a couple of minutes, around the Lighthouse and a project called Transformation for Change. It was originally, the whole piece is about 6 or 7 minutes, but we've cut it down to a couple of minutes. And we want to do something like this for all our centres and start circulating it. And I just thought it'd be worthwhile showing it to you.
Back again. We have a problem with the Wi-Fi connection in terms of the buffering. Sorry.
I think it's because when you said whenever you're ready.
Take your time, take your time.
It's a good video as well. It's a shame that it's frozen.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
When you see it, you'll see.
Really sorry, that's frozen. It's actually a video. It wasn't a series of stills, and there was a talk over as well. So that's about the connection, but I will send it on to you. Okay. So apologies for that one. I'm going to hand over to Jad Millwood, Senior Youth Worker at the Lighthouse, who's going to talk about youth hubs.
Jad, full name Jadil Millwood. So I'm Senior Youth Worker. I manage the Lighthouse Young People Centre. So Birmingham City Council, in partnership with DWP, has been leading on youth hubs, and that was about bringing experiences more locally to young people around, work cultures and access to employability. Now, what I've been able to see firsthand with that approach is around the benefit of young people coming into youth centres and opposed to job centres and not being stigmatised. So a young person can walk into the Lighthouse for support, they see that fantastic building, they don't know which support they're going in for, but also youth workers on hand to create that more joined up work. So for example, when a young person's walked in and they're engaged with a work coach, they're able to then be signposted directly to services that are happening on site, whether it's via the youth worker, with the YPP, with the Youth Employment Initiative that we're delivering, to provide additional support for agencies on site. We've been able to offer support around therapeutic support because we've had that on site through some recent funding, the academy on site, Street League, showing the young person around. So when they want to experience volunteering or engage further, they can have a tour around the building and talk about some of the projects and activities that we're delivering and seeing how they can be more involved, but also to have someone to talk to. So feedback on the stuff that's happening later on around your people having someone to talk to, just that waiting time. And when they're feeling anxious or they're suffering from anxiety as to why their situation is what it is, they've been able to have conversations with youth workers. I spend quite a lot of time having those conversations with them when they're coming in, whether they're waiting to speak to the work coach or whether if they've missed an appointment or the work coach can't attend, being able to pick up and provide that support, as well as being able to work with them directly to deliver. I think since November last year, we delivered about 3 careers events at the Lighthouse, which were all well attended. We've got another one coming in May, which is another way of bringing employers and opportunities to young people firsthand so they can experience and have those conversations. But it's important to see that in a different environment than opposed to a job centre. And I think that's the important thing around the youth hubs, particularly for the youth service. We have two, the Lighthouse and the Factory Young People Centre. And it's around the youth centres playing that role and being part of that initiative locally. Also, when we're looking at in terms of the youth hubs, we're a youth hub for Commonwealth Games. So the youth service have 4 youth hubs for Commonwealth Games as part of that partnership, where the Lighthouse, the Factory, Concord and Clifton Road are youth hubs, where we're delivering pieces of work that go along with that. For example, all the centres are being branded, which we're looking at the kind of a tube station concept with trails going through, which the Lighthouse one has been done. So if any people want to come and have a look at what that looks like, you're more than welcome to. But also specialise in delivering sports, whether it's boxing, basketball, cycling. There's specific sports that Commonwealth Games sports are delivering, and that they're specialising, as well as delivering 6-week projects. So we've delivered the first of the 6-week projects, which took young people through an introduction to the games, really bringing the games to young people in the heart of the community to have the conversation around the Commonwealth Games, taking part in different Commonwealth Games sports. So naturally within youth centres, there's key sports that we naturally deliver that are Commonwealth Games sports, whether it's cricket, whether it's table tennis, netball. During the 6-week programmes, we're a chance to get young people to try different Commonwealth sports, for example, lawn bowls, squash. These were some of the sports that young people were able to try, which they wouldn't have had the opportunity without us being the youth hubs. As well as that, I mean, today we've got our final session, which is around food. So we've got a buffet, different foods from the Commonwealth Games, where young people will be able to try that. As part of that, also we're delivering the basketball skills, which has been really good, where we get young people travelling from quite far, even as far as Leamington Spa, to attend particularly on the weekend. We've got over 120 young people that are registered on the programme, average attendance of about 30 to 40 young people. Where it's the first time we're introducing grading into basketball, so young people can actually see their attainment and what they're achieving and the impact it's having. But also, we've been able to create a real good community basketball community in terms of outside of when young people are playing for their clubs and schools, being able to access quality training and to have that fun in participation with the basketball. We're also delivering things around the Commonwealth Games album that we're creating as well, and doing stuff around youth violence and mixing that in, particularly around Burberry Park. We've got our first community event next month at Burberry Park in partnership with a host of partners, the police, Children's Trust, TORS, the community engagement team from Birmingham Commonwealth Games, community safety, a mixture of partners looking at cultural and celebrating culture within the community. And we're starting that off with Burberry Park in regards to the games. So that's the stuff that we're delivering as a youth hub, and it's helped to bring the conversations and create that buzz for young people in the centre around it. We had our All-Star game on the weekend, which was fantastic. The social media, for you to say, was really blowing up in terms of for us to create content that was young people friendly on our Instagram, which sparked a lot of engagement and a lot of followers. And the benefit for us by being more active as a result of Zula's leadership in terms of this last month is our followers on Instagram have gone up by 250 in the space of a month, and we're almost at 1K. So we'll be celebrating that. We're only about 20 away from 1K. So we'll be celebrating that when we get that. But that shows the benefit to us in terms of being more active on social media.
Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Juliet and Victor to talk about peer research and the peer active collective.
Just tell us your roles, please. So, yeah, please. Thank you.
So, Juliet Faulkner, Senior Youth Worker, Birmingham Youth Service. So I currently manage Maypole Youth Centre and the participation team.
And I'm Victor, and I'm a young person working with the peer research project. So I guess I'm going to be talking about now what we do with the peer research project. So is my voice okay?
A little bit louder.
So in short, what we do with the peer research, we're looking for similarity and differences in young people, which causes them to be involved in youth violence. So we're working on, like in different ways, we're trying to get people's views. I'm going to be involved with 180 participants, like interviews, for example, or focus groups. And we're going to try to understand what specifically causes young people to get involved in youth violence. And a big thing was, so I personally, we did some sort of workshop in the Lighthouse, and when I was listening to people's views, one thing that came up was peer pressure. And when we were thinking, what can we do to actually prevent peer pressure, find their own self, because the people that follow groups, that follow the crowds, for example, fall for peer pressure, is the people that I feel like they don't have a set goal already. And I felt like that could work so well with the fact that they actually have an opportunity to find what they want to do in the future, find what specifically they enjoy doing, then they will be able to follow their own path without being persuaded by other people and following, like joining gangs, for example, getting involved in youth violence. So that was one very big point that we discovered as peer research work. So you probably already know, but we have 12 peer researchers, and I'm one of them. Dem is one of them. And we are going to, as I said, look into specific things that cause young people to suffer from youth violence. And I think this just not help us to actually involve young people to not just be involved in the problem, getting young people to be part of solving the problem. So not just be part of the issue, but actually involved in solving the issue. And I got the opportunity to actually speak to young people, actually just looking at the facial expression, because I've been in a lot of Teams meetings, for example, and just being able to look at people's facial expression and just feel the passion of them saying this is a problem, and someone is actually listening to me. It was really it felt really good. So yeah, that's my bit in working as a peer researcher.
Okay. So just to add, Victor's one of our peer researchers, so they've been working really hard with me in twice a week. So they went through a process of a couple of surveys to kind of find out initially what they wanted their research question to be, and then they kind of pulled those surveys out of what they felt was really important. So like Victor said, the peers and the pathways and the journey that young people take. So we know that people aren't born equally, but if, for instance, you take two children on the same street, same school, same opportunities, kind of what pathway, what influences, clubs, teaching, trusted adults, where's that difference? What they didn't want to do was go back to posters, videos, workshops. We've done that in Birmingham a million times, and we're still seeing the situation we're in. So they're working really hard at how they can get some kind of qualitative data to be able to carry out their social action projects. And then one of the other pieces of work that they're looking at is around something really simple that came out in the surveys was about media and perceived problem and rumour, and how actually that's influencing those, because young people think young people carry knives for protection, and then they see all the stuff in the media, it's actually fueling it and encouraging more young people to become involved in violence. So our chair of the youth violence panel theme group, which is also a police IAG, met with the police yesterday, because one of the pieces of work that they're doing is around asking the police to stop posting video footage on social media when they find knives and guns in a certain area, because that's actually fueling young people to panic and then think they need to carry a weapon to protect themselves. So there's some work going on around that as well.
Thank you, everyone. Elkin, are we open for questions now? Yep. Okay. Councillor Yip.
Thank you, Chair. Just really want to thank you, Victor. I mean, that was very powerfully and succinctly put in a very adequate manner. I just want to offer, perhaps through the Chair, if I may, it would be nice with yourself and your fellow researcher colleagues, if you would be interested, or if you'd like to try and share your recommendations, your findings with us. I think it's really interesting just to hear directly from yourselves, the experience, the surveys, that what you're finding and what you're hearing. If you want to try and put something together and share with us, it would be really interesting for us to hear from that, your experience and what you've gathered.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Morell.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, to echo my colleague, absolutely brilliant presentations there. I just want to start by talking about the marketing strategy. Councillor Francis will know on the Economy and Skills Overview Scrutiny Committee for 4 years, I've consistently talked about marketing strategy and that, we need to be thinking outside the box and, kids that sitting at home, disenfranchised, playing video games, how are you reaching that person? Because they're not really going to go into the local library. So that's really encouraging. It's a shame we couldn't get to see the video about the fact, the youth centre. Where I'm from, Franklin Great Park, we've got the factory. Be interesting to know if you're doing similar activities around the factory as well. And I want to come on to Victor. Absolutely fantastic speech, my friend. I've been talking about this for years. In fact, it was in my election address. And you mentioned goal orientated. I like to use the term purpose. Young people need to understand that they have a purpose in their life. They don't have that purpose. That's when they fall off the rails. And I speak from experience. I dropped out of school and I sold skateboarding videos. And it was the selling of the skateboarding videos that kind of got me on a path into business and entrepreneurship. And I've said on other committees and at council, kids where I'm from, frankly, going out, we talked about county lines, they're selling drugs. What are they effectively doing when they're selling drugs? They're effectively running a business. They're learning these skills organically. Why are we not putting them to one side and teaching them these sort of skills so they go out there and start a business up in a legit form? So that's absolutely brilliant. And I'd love to actually come down and actually see the work that you're doing, in particular at the factory, if we can arrange that. My question is actually about the property portfolio, because I think we can all agree we need more youth centres and we need more of these sort of services. We did a report on the economy and skills that just came to City Council. It was a cross-party piece of work. It was about property portfolio. There are so many community assets. Not many people know, but the City Council, Birmingham owns more assets than the Queen. And a lot of this stuff is just sitting in disrepair because of the internal procurement. That report went to City Council. What are we doing to expand, to really, I don't know, go to the executive of the City Council and say, look, you've got this large property portfolio. We are running a youth service here that is effective. We've got examples, great, brilliant examples here today. I think you should let us use some of this portfolio so that we can expand what we're doing across the wider city and reach much more young people.
Before you respond to that, my question or comment was going to be similar to what you said, Councillor Morell. So we have, through the localism agenda, we're saying that, every single area needs to have services, have different needs. And there are so many community groups that have become active throughout the whole city. So it would be useful to see, a repeat of what you're doing in other areas, in other community hubs. We spoke before about having satellite community hubs years ago, before we introduced the devolution agenda. But, what can we do to sort of encourage more activity like that across the city, to engage more young people in more positive, proactive work? So that would be really, really good. So I'm going to pass over to you, whoever's going to respond to that, please. Sheila?
Okay. I can respond a little bit to that. In terms of the peer action and the work that Victor's talking about, that is a city-wide programme. However, we are determined, because it's an externally funded programme through the Youth Endowment Fund, we have targets and areas that we need to hit, and they are the traditional kind of areas that you associate with youth violence. So whilst we're trying to make it citywide, particularly with the social action, it has been slightly targeted. In terms of portfolio and property and youth centres, our aspiration, probably about 10 years ago, we started on a plan where we wanted to have a youth provision within 20 minutes walking distance of every young person in Birmingham. However, that has really changed now because the landscape around youth services has changed drastically because of funding. But if resources and investment become available, that would be an ideal thing, so that there's a youth provision for every young person that they can walk to. It's local to them. And we're not just having a few in certain areas. The whole thing around building the community asset transfers, absolutely, but it's also about putting the resources in there. You can be given the building, but it's about how you're going to staff that building and to do it effectively.
Well, that's where I suppose we tap into local community groups.
Absolutely, yes.
Where we've empowered the community groups to get active and to deliver services. How do we then push that onto the next level by engaging them in other services? Perhaps this could be a pilot that you've done with the Youth Endowment Fund, and use that pilot and the outcomes of that pilot to, you know, expand that service across the city would be brilliant. Sorry.
I should have took the opportunity after Victor. I wasn't sure whether to after questions, but so in terms of youth voice and youth participation, strong youth city board with over 40 young people and about 25 who are really active. And if you see it on Twitter feed, you would have seen that we were in Liverpool the other day, who were absolutely raging about the success of Youth Voice in Birmingham, and they want to model that, and they've asked for all our documents and papers. So we have young people sat at the heart of writing the violence strategy, working with the police. We've got the voice of the Commonwealth Games. So young people really active in that as well, and they've identified 5 theme groups. So one is around health and well-being. That's because the COVID Youth Champions finishes this week, and young people for the first time have been allowed to sit on the public health forums where the professionals are. So they sit on those with Justin Varney. So there's health and well-being, climate change, education and employment. You might have to help me out here. Youth violence, and infrastructure, so the PB 2040, that type of thing. And that, when you look at, that's kind of pan Birmingham, those young people. So they're 11 to 18, they cover a lot of postcodes, ethnicities and schools. But our Youth City Board Twitter, you'll see some of the things on that as well.
Okay.
If I may just add to that, so just picking up on what Juliet just shared, that aspect, and then to add to it. So I think in terms of the question, stroke challenge, is the Youth City Board is absolutely crucial to what we want to do. So the Youth City Board is part of the formal governance now of the wider City Board, and we also wanting to use the Youth City Board to inform increasingly more and more policy development and service design in terms of co-design. And I think the Youth Hub is part of that, but it's just one example. So just in terms of the Youth Hubs, so we have this, what's known as this, you know, hub and spokes model, and we do already have one. So some of it is already in community partnership. It's growing, and we want to take it further. But I mean, for example, Witton Lodge is one of the Youth Hubs in partnership with ourselves and Combined Authority and DWP, and of course local partners. So I think that's crucial. And actually, the great thing is each Youth Hub, well, whilst we've got a broad template, each one will be different to recognise that need and be generated through that co-design that I just touched on. It just so happens I was at Birmingham City University yesterday, where they've got a huge new investment which is going to be open in terms of the STEAM, and there they talked a lot about enterprise, if I may. This is very early days, but since the question was asked, is, you know, how can we actually possibly add that to the portfolio of Youth Hubs in terms of that enterprise element, because that will be key to increasing innovation, local engagement, and seeing role modelling linked directly to employers. So I think that's really hard to consider. I think the other thing to say, Victor, I've already met some of my senior leadership team in terms of the library services around, and it's definitely been an eye-opener in terms of we definitely got healthy challenges and very practical suggestions. So when I go to the monthly City Board, I have to say I'm invited and absolutely find it beneficial. So the 3 key messages that I get, you know, in terms of underlining what's just come through is importance around safety, physical and well-being, employment and skills, and again, I think the third one is just people feeling involved and feeling a lot more in control. So I think as we go forward, as part of that early intervention, coming back to that, of course, that cabinet paper that was submitted last week, and prevention work, that would include, as well as the heart, the head bit. So where have we got those assets? Where are those assets already in play? What more can we do to support and indeed bring out and you know, benefit from the expertise, local trust on the ground from local groups? So I think it will, for the first time, I believe we're going to have the best possible resource and approach to actually joining up these various what appear to be disparate areas, but actually bringing them together. I think, you know, a lot of the career service now, in terms of its statutory responsibility for the council, is into 18, but we do a lot more work pre-16 in terms of supporting people who are at risk of need. Education or employment, or some kind of other post-16 opportunity. So I think what I'd like to do, because there's quite a lot of work that's being done, and what we'd like to do, but it's not yet ready to share with you today, is when we have the next coming together of this particular committee, which I understand will be in June, we'd very much like to share that vision with you, so that you can actually see something in more concrete terms.
Fantastic, thank you, Ilkin. I think it's the neighbourhood network scheme obviously already done the mapping across the whole city in terms of assets and community groups that are active. So maybe I'm assuming that's who you're looking to tap into. Councillor Jenkins, did you have a question as well?
A lot of it's been covered now, I think. I was really excited to hear about the peer researchers, Victor, so thank you for sharing that with us. And I would totally agree with Councillor Yippin that it would be great for some of the peer researchers to come back to us at another meeting and give us a bit more of an overview of the work that you're doing. The branding, the youth centres of safe spaces, hurrah! You know, it's something we've been arguing for in the bigger we, not just on this, not this scrutiny, for many years, because that's exactly what they are. And you know, part of my real life involvement has always been about making sure that people recognise the true value of having those buildings, those youth centres, because we lost a lot of youth centres across the UK. And those buildings are just so important to young people, and they are safe spaces. So we shouldn't need to have to brand them, but you know, to brand them for all young people is great. I wanted to ask Jadil and Juliet. Hi, Juliet. I haven't met you before. Really, as youth workers that have been in the service for some time, and with the last couple of years have created a lot of challenges, not just for the youth service and for youth workers, but for young people. So with that regard, for you guys, what are the sort of challenges, and how do you think your approach has changed? But also, are you feeling more valued now as youth workers and as part of the youth service in terms of the council's recognition that youth services are so important to the lives of young people? And then just finally, a question for Victor. Sorry to put you on the spot, Victor, but we love having young people here, and we don't have enough young people coming to this committee. So hopefully this will be the start of wonderful things. But as a young person using the service, what do you see works well, and what else do you think might make it even better?
Can I start with answer to your question? I'm going to do it in reverse around the value for youth service. I start off by saying I love working for the City Council. I'm the product of the service in terms of engaging with a youth worker at the age of 15. And that was because I disagreed with what they done with their cancel the session to make it more inclusive. And as a result of challenge that, I got more involved in the youth service. I'm the product of the youth service. But in terms of for youth work to be branded, in all honesty, I would say the council would need to make a statement. When you're looking at the situation when there's the youth service, I think where the capacity that we're operating at in terms of the funding, the lack of funding, is making a commitment. It's great that we've got the £1 million youth investment. That is fantastic. That's for 12 months. What would be great to see is actually to say to the youth service, this is a long-term strategy. This is a long-term funding. We value you as a youth service, and we see the strength in you being able to develop and grow. We've got the largest youth service in the country. The things that we do in Birmingham, you're not seen around the country. And I'm in contact with other workers, and I think our service is fantastic and has a lot to offer. But it's around it being resourced. And you know, we're probably the Manchester cities of the youth service in terms of that in the country. And it's around having that commitment to say, actually, with us being the youngest city in Europe, is the investment in our city, does that match that in terms of how much we invest in young people, and around with our youth service in terms of whether we value the youth service. I feel that the youth service value me from in terms of my head of service, my line management, and the contribution that I make, and they're good at showing that value in terms to make me feel valued as a worker. How things have changed in terms of for us to adapt with, in terms of the issues affecting young people, in terms of coming out of youth work in a pandemic. That was a challenge in terms of adjusting and dealing with the issues coming out of the pandemic, and the mental health, but also the transition for young people in terms of their attitude and their behaviour from not being able to socialise and being around other people for close to nearly 2 years, and that lack of development that some of the young people have developed. So some of the 14-year-olds that you're working with have got the mentality of 11 and 12-year-olds now as a result of that. And it's been able to constantly respond to the issues that present, whether it's around food. Food hunger is a serious one for the young people, and the constant need to make sure that there's food there when young people come to the youth centre and they're hungry. And the fact that we have food from Fair Share, we've always got pot noodles, toast, and things that allow young people to make a hot drink or something to eat. Also around domestic abuse, exploitation, and linking that in particular around the investment with the games in terms of the strategy around exploitation in our city. We're going to have a lot of people visiting our city, a lot of communities that are, you have to ask the question, are they ready to receive the people and the footfall that's going to come through in terms of engaging with those communities? I don't know if the communities are ready and if they've been worked with. And it's around how do we coordinate and work with all that together to make sure the games is fantastic. It's going to put Birmingham on the map, but also it's that young people feel part of that. And it's great that we've got the youth hubs, and it's around how we generate that. But we've got youth hubs, but there's been no tickets allocated for young people where you actually say we're taking it serious, where we're going to allocate tickets where if you've got aspirations to want to be an athlete, you know, whether it's in athletics, that we've got tickets to say we can take young people to the games where they can see those athletes competing in one of the, you know, the biggest sporting competitions in the world. And it's those tokens to show value to young people, value to the service, to say that things are taken serious. And I hope that kind of answers part of your question.
So I actually come from Dorset. 97 went to West Hill, which makes you kind of realise how old you are. I've been in the service since 99. And I have to say at this point, although she'll hate it, that our head of service is absolutely amazing. And I think that sometimes you guys don't realise the heart and soul that goes into running this service. You know, 9 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock in the morning, Saturday, Sundays, Sula will answer her phone anytime to her staff. She'll cover sessions, she'll jump when City Council says jump, and this service wouldn't be here if Sula hadn't have fought to keep it here, because many local authorities, when they got rid of their service, we were really at risk of losing a service. And if Sula and Mark at the time hadn't been there to fight for us and still fighting for us, and actually we kind of feel this is the first year, like Jad had said, where things are coming back to us, and she could have given up. You know, I certainly wouldn't have stayed in that job fighting for a whole service against everybody the whole time. And for all of us as staff as well, like Jad, I love working for Birmingham City Council. I had chances to take huge redundancies, you know, and kind of thought about that. But my passion is young people, Birmingham City Council and this service. And for everything we have little moans about, because you're in a local authority, I actually feel protected in my job to retirement. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud of working with Birmingham. But I think sometimes Birmingham needs to look outside the box at how a service like the youth service has to work. And we can't always, you know, through the pandemic, every single one of us worked every single day, down to wellbeing packs, going to people's houses. I was terrified of COVID. I had a family and we never stopped working. And that was with Sula at the heart of that and at the top of that. She advocates for her staff every time and shields us a lot of the time from probably what she's getting from above to make her service work. so we can do it. And I think we're really good at changing and adapting. We've gone from generic services to focusing on smoking and alcohol to having most of our service doing YEI and employment, and still maintaining a generic open service. And I think we get burnt out and Sula picks us up again. You know, we're all doing 2 jobs, we're all doing ridiculous hours. And I probably shouldn't like get on my soapbox at this point, but I think it's because I'm so passionate about our service and young people and the work that we do, opening centres, you know, responding at any time of day, work with schools. There's so much you don't know about in the hearts and minds of that staff and everything they do every day, and our head of service. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let Victor say what he gets.
Okay, so in terms of services, I think that we have society and the world changing as we go. And if we looked at maybe 10 years ago, the services or the infrastructures we had would have been good. But I think that as society changes, these things should also change as well. And I think we should focus on the young people that grew up in this change to actually give their opinions and actually work on changing or improving these things. I think, like, say for example, an example is the libraries, which I mentioned with Ilgun some time ago, which, okay, is good, but I feel like there's so many things that we could improve in libraries, for example, and that is just an example that could help young people right now in so many positive ways. And so I spoke to Ilgun, I spoke to the head of libraries, and that is just an example that I think if you involve young people in actually improving things, you're going to have so much stuff that people may not actually realize that is something I can do, or because the way I see things might be slightly different. So like the angle I look at things is different because let's say for example, in this changing world, it's like I see libraries as a lack of, there's so much potential that we're not using right now. And so I think that although we have services, a lot that we could improve, and involve young people to improve these things would be.
What have you done and how did that make you feel?
So again, I'm part of the Youth City Board, and some things I've done was like being the chair for the interviews for the assistant director for wider determinants. And I think just being involved in all these things, it just not just rewarding, but it also feel like it closes the gap between like communities, people, and the council, the government, because I feel like being so involved just makes me put my trust so much more into people in policymakers. And I personally can say that, okay, I know the director for public health, for example, Justin Barney, and looking and working with him so much, I know that I can trust this person. I know that what he does is the right thing because he's involved so many people. But other young people that are not involved with me may not know this thing and may not be as confident as the people that policymakers for. So something I've done was Commonwealth Games. That's a lot. There's been a lot of work currently. There was this £50,000 from the Commonwealth Games that we were working on to give to young people with psychological and physical needs. And then, how can I remember? Again,
Flag bearer at the palace.
Oh yeah, flag bearer at the Palace Commonwealth Games. That one, I can't remember much. I actually can't think.
Too much happened.
Yeah, I think just that closing the gap between council and communities. I think that's a really.
Yeah. Thanks, Victor.
I mean, one of the things that I always notice, and I've pointed it out on several occasions, is that when we have our ward committees, I don't know about other elected members, but and also, although it's we welcome anyone that will attend our ward committees, there's hardly ever any children, young people that attend our ward committees that feed into the issues and what their views are on the issues in the local area. So it is about creating that connection between young people and the council. So, and Jadil, you said as well, it's about value. You use the word value. So when Ilgun, you were talking about engaging with young people, I was waiting for you to say the word value. And I know you probably already think it, but you didn't say it. but Jadil, you did. It's about making young people feel valued and their opinions valued by the council, and making them aware that we value what their perspective is, and also taking ownership of their local area as well. So, you know, we're working on the localism agenda. It's about making young people feel, actually, this is also my area, and we want to see services in this area as well, and activate the young people, not just the older generations. And whilst, you know, I'm not saying, I don't want this to be taken to say that we don't value their opinions, but I think it would be really good to get the views of more young people in decision making on a local level. And I've often talked about having a youth ward committee in my ward, and having it just for young people under a certain age. Then I thought, am I going to get accused of being discriminatory against the older generation? But it would be really good to get young people to come to a meeting and think, actually, you know, there's going to be lots of other young people that look like me, that might have the same issues as me, to sort of like voice their concerns or their opinions on what's going on in our local areas.
Yeah, just on that point, sorry to interrupt, but just on that point, I mean, I've raised this before you were chair many times. I don't think we should be expecting young people to come to us. We should be going to young people. And I've said it many times that councillors that are lucky enough to have youth centres in their wards should actually be going into those centres and holding those meetings for young people to engage with if they want to.
Yeah, well, we could do it that way. I mean, I'm just talking about getting their opinions and their voices heard. So whatever platform we do use, whether we go to them and hold a meeting, say, okay, we're going to come to you, you know, come and talk to us, tell us what your issues are, what your views are on different things. Sorry.
Just really quickly, in our paper that we wrote about youth participation, one of our aspirations is to have locality boards as arms of so they're closely aligned to councillors and what's going on more locally. We just don't have the resources to do it at the moment.
We might have the resources to pilot somewhere in the near future.
Yeah.
Just on that last bit, I think it's around, you can have a meeting, you could call young people to a meeting, but I think it's around whether the young people are going to trust that if they've not had any dealings with their locally elected members.
Yeah.
I think it's partly around developing that relationship where you can walk into any youth centre, they know who you are, you can have a conversation with a group that's sitting down or that's around the pool table, that's in the kitchen, where that will be more honest and open, and you'll get a lot more from that than a bigger meeting, because some of them will probably just come to it and a lot of them just probably be quiet, but they won't give you the true nature of what they're feeling unless they've been heavily prepped and that there's elements of trust.
This is very valid point. Councillor Yip.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just mindful of the time. I just want to make 2 points. I want to draw the committee's attention to the letter that was written. That's on the agenda papers. I think that's very powerful, and it was lovely written from a young person to a youth worker, and just highlighting the impact. You know, that's very much worth a read. Second, and following up from the comments made, is it possible for us, is it appropriate for us as a scrutiny to request to the Commonwealth Games Director for perhaps a number of tickets to be disseminated, perhaps direct to Suella, for it to be shared down to youth workers to try and build that engagement, to try and find a way of, you know, sort of getting them involved with the games. I think that's something that we as scrutiny can do and make that request.
Yeah, happy to send that letter on behalf of the committee. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending. It was a very insightful presentation, and thank you in particular, Victor, for attending and sharing your views and perspectives and your findings. We look forward to reading more about that. If you could share the insights that were shared with you by the young people that you've been talking to, so that'd be really useful and interesting for us to understand as well. Thank you. Okay. Item 8, we have the SEND agenda. Welcome Sabia from the Parent Carer Forum for joining us today for today's meeting again. So today we're looking at objective 2, getting the basics right, special educational needs assessment and review service. So we're having the presentation by Pauline. Are you doing the presentation on that?
I'll start off and then pass over to Faye. So,
okay.
Sorry to disturb you, but also Councillor Q, and I've got colleagues online, Pam and Joe, who have also joined us online from the Forum Committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm the SRO for this particular objective. As you will remember, it's been agreed that it be as the SEND Improvement Board split into 2. One is SENAR, and this is what we're doing today, The next one on health and waiting lists will be at the next meeting of this overview and scrutiny. So that's why we won't be addressing any of those aspects. Just to say, there's been major change in terms of SENAR, which is still an interim structure, and there will continue to be massive changes in relation to SENAR. One would hope that those improvements will be seen. Clearly, it's for many people, it's too early yet, although we are seeing with both parents and schools some traction in terms of that change. And certainly at the last meeting, there were questions over the quality and assurance arrangements in terms of the outputs in terms of education, health and care plans and the advice relating to that, and we'll address that in the slides. And obviously a big area, of course, is improved communications, particularly with parents and carers, but also with schools, so that people are aware of where we are in the system. Just before Faye looks at the slides, just in case people are aware, yesterday the government published their long-awaited green paper on SEND. It's SEND and called Alternative Provision. I would call a diagnostic, i.e. what is wrong with the system, because it's recognised it's failing nationally. Matches Birmingham's situation, but actually that we've always known, and well, I say we've always known, we've certainly known for let's say the last 8 months that we've been really going into this, that actually other authorities are in the same boat, some even worse, and they're not even holding, for example, annual reviews. The whole system needs to be changed. And indeed, within the proposals in the green paper, and it's a green paper, so just proposals, there is going to be a significant look at the assessment review system, which is likely to lead to legislative change. And so that is what we're talking about in terms of the assessment review system. Well, I want to assure you that that will not slow our pace in terms of the agenda that we've got here and in terms of the changes we want to make. Clearly, as we go through possibly to 2024, if we look at when legislation might come about, we'll take account of various changes. But we are going on a pace to make improvements. Faye Higgins is a PMO for this particular objective, and also, if I can say, Faye is absolutely integral, not just a PMO looking at the project plan, it's absolutely integral to that improvement journey. So I'm going to pass over to you, Faye.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, isn't it? Yeah, my name's Faye Higgins. I'm the Programme and Change Manager for Birmingham City Council. I will say at this point, I am a permanent member of staff. We are a dying breed in the SENAR service at present, but I am a permanent. I'm going to go through some slides. I probably will talk quite ad hoc. I'm aware there are probably many questions. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to answer all of those for you today. So we secured additional funding back in August, from full cabinet, and that gave us a significant amount of money to invest in the SENAR service. At the point when I joined the SENAR service 12 months ago, we had 22 full-time equivalent members of staff facilitating over 10,000 education healthcare plans. We have recruited over 50 new officers into the service, and actually today that's probably more like 70 because we're on a complete recruitment drive at present. We've now got over 80 members of staff working in our service facilitating those 10,500 education healthcare plans, and we have split the service back into what it was 3 or 4 years ago in area teams, which is north, south, east and west. Young people in our city are allocated into one of those area teams dependent upon their education setting postcode. However, if they are home-based, they are allocated into an area team based on their home postcode. We have added a lot more management capacity into the service, and I think it's important to say at this point we've added experienced agency management capacity into that service. a number of the staff that are working in that service have not had any kind of workforce development or training for a significant amount of time, and we've needed to bring that expert resource into the service. We have changed our decision-making processes. You may or may not be aware that before Ofsted came to us in the spring of last year, we had decision-making groups where every single decision for the service went through a decision-making group. We've now removed that and gone back to SEND panels, which is more in line with what other local authorities have. It's a multi-agency panel, whereas some of the lower level decisions around the basic fundings and placement activity is actually taken by the service officers that are experienced and trained to make those decisions. We are developed a training plan for Nexus, which is our case management system where we hold all of the basic children's data. That system was implemented, and I use that word really loosely, colleagues, implemented just prior to Ofsted coming in. However, having done a thorough review of that programme, it isn't actually ready to be used yet, but we have given all of the staff in the service the basic training so that when we're ready to integrate that system, everybody has the basics.
When did you say that was implemented?
It was progress to be implemented prior to Ofsted, so the sisters May time last year. We have done a complete review of the Nexus system, as in what was already embedded. There was several training sessions that took place, but we had very little representation on that from the service, because at the time there wasn't really anybody in the service working in order to facilitate that. So we've completely overhauled, reviewed that, and we have reviewed the quality assurance process, which was there but not robust anywhere near enough in order for us to use it as a framework as for what good looks like, and to make sure that we're actually delivering quality plans. So to go into a little bit more detail about quality assurance, so we are developing a multi-agency quality assurance framework. We have a working group of officers within the SEND service, our health colleagues, our Birmingham City Council Trust colleagues. We have coordinated and looked at a coherent approach around the cycle of learning, looked at continual improvement. We, as a working group, are at final draft stage for that quality assurance framework. We have also got a draft version of what good looks like. We have reviewed a tool which the council purchased last year to make sure that that's fit for purpose, which is called Envision. That's going to help us actually complete audit activity against our education healthcare plans. Next stage is to meet with our parent carer forum colleagues, which I'm happy to say we are doing this week, for a targeted approach to that quality assurance framework, because it's great if all of the officers and sit around a table and agree, but it's parents that understand what good looks like more than anybody else. We're really keen to meet with Parent Care Forum to get their advice and understanding of that quality assurance process. And then we're going to spread that out wider to families, and we're hoping to actually speak to some young people and get their opinion on that as well. I'll give you a little bit of an overview about Nexus, which is our case management system. So the benefits of Nexus and the reason that it was commissioned it's part of a system that we already engage with called Impulse Classic. So Nexus is the upgraded version of that system that we've already had in the council for a significant amount of time. What it actually does, the upgrade, is gives us better usability for partners. So at the moment in the service, like a number of other areas in the council, we use spreadsheets to control all of our data. Actually, Nexus gives us the opportunity to remove a lot of that spreadsheet holding data, because it will actually give us that data format within the system itself. It actually gives managers in the service a deeper insight into staff caseloads, so we can actually see how many cases our officers are holding. That actually helps and supports with capability management of officers. It actually gives us a more stringent handle on their workload as well, so that if we've got casework that's rising or dipping, we can make amendments to that. The documentation that goes within that system is linked directly into our quality assurance framework that we will have co-produced. It's actually more robust at recording the capability, and it links better with the Eclipse system, for example, in the trust, so that if we are allowed to put the Eclipse number in there, then we'll know automatically as officers, from want of a better phrase, both sides of the fence, that that child is then within the trust as well as within SENAR. It actually gives us the opportunity to build a parent portal. So we will have a parent portal, we will have a professionals portal, we have a schools portal, and we have a portal that's used by the SENAR service. Interestingly, when you look at the green paper from yesterday, where they talk about they want to put the education healthcare plan online so that parents have access to it, that's exactly what Nexus is going to do. So actually we're, I hate to say this, but a little bit ahead of the curve maybe with what we're progressing with Nexus. It actually also gives us the ability to build bespoke dashboards within that system so that we can report on targeted information as well as reporting on our statutory timescales. So bit of an update on the service structure. So there's an awful lot of work to do in order to restructure the SENAR service. As I said, there's 22 full-time equivalent members of staff currently in the service. We've got over 80 members of staff full stop at the minute. So as you can see, there's a significant amount of work to do with restructure. The issues that we have around restructure at the moment is we don't quite know ourselves yet. We still don't quite know ourselves in SENAR. We have an awful lot of cases that have not been looked at and not been managed significantly well for a number of years. And therefore, the more in-depth review of the service we do, the more cases we begin to look at and touch with officers, the more work is involved. We're really mindful that when we go back to Cabinet, which we are aiming for in September, we're going to go with a growth bid for the service, that when we go with that growth bid, that it's 100% what we actually need to run that service. We are meeting with other local authority leaders within those services that the DfE have put us in touch with. I've met with Leeds already. I've met with Telford and Wrekin, Worcestershire. I'm meeting with Leeds this week. We are trying to meet with as many local authorities as we can that are comparable to us from a numbers perspective. However, the closest we've got so far is 6,000 education healthcare plans, and we've got 10,500. However, what we are finding by meeting with those other colleagues in other local authorities is that what we're aiming for from a structure perspective is comparable to what they're doing at the moment. And actually, we are outperforming those authorities when we're looking at statutory timeframes, despite the fact that our service is in such a dire state. We'll need, in order before we go to restructure, to review every job description within the service. Some of our permanent members of staff are still under job descriptions that talk about SEND before the reforms in 2015. So we will need to review every job description. We are already engaged bi-weekly with union colleagues. So I meet with union colleagues every second week and keep them informed and updated as to what we're doing with SENAR restructure. So we are very lucky in the sense of that we've got really good relationships with our colleagues. I think it's important to note I've been taking part in the West Midlands network for assessment and review leads. The entire West Midlands is struggling to recruit SEND staff at the moment. One of the comments that was made at that meeting was that it's because they're all working for us. And interestingly, this week, we're starting to get approached by staff that are working for other local authorities that want to come and work with us. And I think the difference between Birmingham and some of our other local authorities, and I'll use a phrase that a colleague of mine used a couple of weeks ago, all of the England SEND services are in a bad state. They just haven't found theirs yet. Whereas we have, I know this is a massive opportunity for us as a city council to really become the flagship of what a SEND service should be. And what we've got at the moment is we have got investment from Cabinet, we have got support from the Commissioner and from the Department for Education. We've got a really high level dedicated team of officers working in this service. what we've got now is people approaching us to saying, well, you've got the investment, you've got the eyes on you, you know what you're doing, can we come and be part of that? And I think that's a really powerful message at the moment, because we've gone in a really short period of time from being, oh my God, Birmingham's awful, to we want to come and be part of your improvement journey. And I think that's a really powerful message. And that is a credit to the work that the transformation team are doing, especially the support from our PCF colleagues. They've been integral to some of the work that we've been doing in Senart and around the SEN transformation programme. And it's a credit to some of the staff that we've got working with us. The one good thing about having a significant number of agency interim staff in our service at the moment is that we are now automatically got access to pull best practice from performing local authorities across the country, because they're working for us in our service. So just to give you a little bit of impact, we are on track and we're looking at service models. Obviously, we are upgrading our contact points for our Senart staff. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we get from parents and families and young people is they still don't know who to contact in Senart. They still don't know how to speak to a case officer. They still don't have a phone number or an email address. And we've had such significant churn in the last 8 months with interim staff that we haven't been able to get to that point. We will be releasing at the end of April a full, what I would call, phone tree. We will be giving access to all schools. We'll be reaching out to parents and families and giving them the name, email address and telephone number for their caseworker. We have done a lot of work with our agency colleagues that we work really closely with, and with the interim staff that we're employing, to embed those agency staff until the end of March 2023. What that gives us actually is more stability in the service, so that we can share those names and numbers, and we have confidence that we're then not going to have to reach out to that family within the next week and say, actually, we've changed your officer again, which is what was happening previously. So we have a bit of confidence in that. Reviews. So we are still dealing with a backlog of reviews. I think it's interesting when you talk to other local authorities, some local authorities are not even conducting annual reviews. So although we are behind and we are looking at backlog, we have just re-reviewed the structure, and alongside our finance colleagues reviewed what we spent from the cabinet monies that was given to us for last year, and realised that we have got a bit of an underspend. So what we've done with that underspend is we're bringing in more colleagues so that we can really attack that annual review backlog. Assessments. So we are working to bring our assessments back in line with the 20 weeks. I will say we are impacted at the moment. We've got significant resource that we've put back into our Senart service. However, our health colleagues and our Birmingham Trust colleagues have not got the additional resource within their teams. So some of those assessments are pushed from there and they go over timescales because they just can't keep up with the numbers. And significantly, our educational psychology service are really struggling at present in order to keep up with what we're turning over. We are looking at that as an entity as part, again, of the programme of improvement. How can we support our EP service? Can we invest in them to bring some more locum EPs in to try and get us over the time frame, while we also work with finance colleagues around how we secure additional funding for the EP service moving forward. This is one piece that I'm really pleased about, is our complaints in Senart. So we're currently sitting at 18. That was as of the 18th of March. We had 147 active complaints in September, and we've been averaging over 100 Senart complaints for as long as I've been here, which is just under 3 years. So the fact that we're at 18, we are starting to get actually back in line with service level agreements, and we're managing to turn those complaints around within the 15 days as well. That's a testament to the fact that we actually know ourselves now as a service, and the caseworkers know their staff, they know their young people. And I think what we are starting to see from the complaints data at the moment is we have a culture amongst some parents and some pockets within our city that those that shout the loudest get the most. And we're working really, really hard again with our Parent Carer Forum colleagues and other parents and young people to try and change that. I think previous, if you complained, it was the only way you could contact us as a service. It was the only way you got a resolution to any problems. Now that we're actually starting to attack that from the ground and caseworkers are reaching out to families and young people when they see that the case is complex, we're starting to see a drop in those complaints. And actually the number of complaints that we've got coming through are more around the fact that we don't have enough special school places within the city. So next steps, we need to plan and design a pilot development for the assessment process. Again, we're working with our Parent Carer Forum colleagues on these, part of our targeted meeting this week. We are looking at a new education healthcare template. We are looking at a new education healthcare needs assessment process. What we are building with that is we are actually building that what I would call paper-based. I think as much as we want to build everything into our Nexus online case management system, I think we also have to recognise that we have huge pockets of digital poverty in our city, and not everybody has access to a laptop or an iPad or a smartphone in order to complete that process. So we need to make sure that that process is robust enough to be able to do that within a library setting, for example, where they can pull those documents and have those paper-based documents and still submit in the same way. Again, we're online with those parts of what were in the green paper around the digital format. We're already working on building our EHCP needs assessment into a digital format so that parents and carers and young people and professionals can actually build that directly into the system. As part of that, we are reviewing every single piece of documentation that we send out from the service, from a letter to say, hello, welcome to the service, to this is your final education healthcare plan, and this is your review. What we tend to do in the service at the moment is, for example, if we say no to a needs assessment, we'll say to a parent, we've said no, but you can apply for a SEND support plan, follow the link on the local offer website, and then you just end up in a rabbit one of the local offer website and don't know where to go. What we should actually be doing is giving targeted advice to that parent on how to go about applying for a SEND support plan, providing with the necessary forms in order to apply for that SEND support plan. That's just a small part of what we're doing. I say small part, there's probably over 300 documents that we use. So it's a massive piece of work. Again, reviewing the restructure so that we can actually create permanent structure. I think it's important to note that even when we put the growth bid in, we build the permanent structure, it's likely to take us 2 years to actually embed that with permanent member of staff. And there is going to be a reliance on agency staff for the foreseeable future. Because in order to increase our service the way we need to facilitate the current plans and allow for the increase in requests for assessments that we've got coming through the service at the moment, we're not going to be able to sustain that. I think, interestingly, what we need to do, and listening to some of our youth colleagues here today, what we need to do better as an organisation and our SEND service as a whole, and this goes into the whole transformation programme, is to reach out to those people that we've got within our service that we're providing a service to with education and healthcare needs, and ask them, what would you need to do in order to be a caseworker? How do we actually drive that development for children in our own city to actually take part and be part of the solution? I come from a world of apprenticeships. I'm very passionate about apprenticeships. I spoke to a member of the DFE yesterday about once, we've got a lot to do before we get to that point, but blue sky thinking for the future, we should be looking at building with the West Midlands Combined Authority, a caseworker apprenticeship so that children can come out of school at 16 and 18 and actually learn from the ground how to be within that special education needs department, because at the moment we don't have any kind of progression. And that's not just Birmingham, that's countrywide. We don't offer progression in that way. So EHC needs assessment project. So I've touched on this already, but we are reviewing all of the internal documentations and processes with regards to the education and healthcare needs assessment. We are looking at putting in a pilot so that come September, anybody that starts within the service from September or any annual reviews conducted after September 2023 will go onto the new template and go through the new process. with regards to then being and linking into the parent portal, etc. for Nexus. So last thing for me is some risks. So we've got some contract negotiations that we're working with CACI, who are our Nexus case management system provider. Some of the delays in that could potentially lead to implementation issues. However, since this slide that was produced, we've had a meeting with senior IT colleagues just yesterday, and I've got another 2 this afternoon, where those risks are being mitigated in the sense of that we are being given targeted IT and procurement support in order to get over that hurdle so that we can get Nexus embedded. One of the key risks that we've got at the moment is that, and I use the analogy somebody else used in a meeting, so I'm pinching this, we are trying to fix a car whilst driving it at 70 miles an hour down a motorway. So we have got officers within the service that are focusing on the statutory functionality of delivering our reviews and assessments in line with the SEND Code of Practice, as well as trying to deal with the transformation of all of the documentation and all of the services at the same time. That's a risk for us right now. And the biggest one is finance. So at present, we don't have permanent funding. We only have funding until the end of 2023. However, we are confident that when we go with our growth bid in September, given the findings from the Ofsted report and the Commissioner's report and the work that we're doing around the transformation programme, that the investment is going to be there in order to actually deliver the service that we should.
Thank you very much. Before I bring Sabir in to see if she wants to add anything else, I just want to notify the committee that Councillor Thompson is in a safeguarding board, which is why she couldn't join us. Otherwise, I know she wanted to be here for the CSE item and also for this item as well. So Sabir, is there anything you'd like to add? Before I continue, sorry, are members happy to continue? Because I'm just mindful that we've run over time, but we just had some really important issues that we need to have at the meeting today. So Sabir, do you have any?
Thank you, Councillor Kuna. Just a couple of points of clarification, and also I'll start with the questions then, if that's okay, Councillor, if I've got ahead of you in the queue today. Yeah, so obviously it's an interesting space that I sit in because we are, as a PCF, working very closely with Faye and Pauline and the delivery, but we're also mindful that we're still getting feedback from parents on the ground as well. And it's that sort of gap where we know there's loads of work happening, but the impact isn't being felt on the ground yet. So just to pull up a couple of things from here. The first question was around the areas. And you did say, Faye, about, the homeschool cohort will fall with the geographical address. Does the same apply to our youngsters that are out of local authority?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you for clarity on that. And the question around finding a LA that has similar numbers to us. So as a forum, we've actually buddied with Somerset, even though they're not close to us, but numbers wise, they're more rural, but they're quite close in numbers of EHCP. So I can definitely look at linking you up.
That would be fabulous
with them. The next question is around Parent Link. So I know, again, we've had that concept. It'd be good to get some clarity with regards to the role that Parent Link will play moving forward, because we know there's a huge issue with solo working. I'm mindful that if we're giving caseworkers phones and allocate, but it does say that, work alongside Parent Link, so maybe just some clarity, and we can look at that in the meetings that we have outside of here with what role that service will play as we move forward. And the final question was around the EHCP template that you spoke about. I haven't yet had a chance to properly scrutinise the green paper, but I've been picking up bits and pieces from other people that have done that work. And I believe that there is some talk about having a national EHCP template. So obviously it's now aligning the work of the transformation that we're doing as a city with the review, because that's a fine example. If it is decided that there needs to be a national EHCP template, then obviously that's what we have to go with. So yeah, that's everything from me. Thank you, Chair.
I'll address, yes, please, for Somerset. If you can put me in touch, that would be great. As far as the Parent Link service is concerned, they are evolving as the service are evolving. At the moment, they're our point of contact because the officers haven't had phones. We've had to go through an inordinate amount of work with IT in order to get everybody access to a phone. That's obviously been exacerbated because we're coming out of the COVID and the pandemic, and everybody left their desk phones on a desk. So we've worked on that, but I actually think that our Parent Link service have got a really key position to play moving forward. What they're doing at the moment is we have a number of people that reach out to our service that believe they've been waiting for years for an assessment. And when actually our parent link officers reach out and speak to those individuals, they've never actually even requested an assessment. They don't even know how to do that. And I actually think that our parent link service are delivering a really good service at the moment. They engage in webinars. We're going to be looking at using them to support and deliver training sessions to SENCOs around what good looks like, because we can deliver training for Nexus and how to use the case management system and how what good looks like, but then the SENCO will leave that school and change that setting, and we get a new SENCO that's not really very experienced. I think there's still a role for our parent link service moving forward, but I think that that will evolve and adapt as we evolve and adapt the service.
Do any other members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Yip.
Thank you. I really want to thank you. Very comprehensive report on a very topical and complicated issue. As members may know, I also sit on the improvement board, and I think it is a sign of confidence that the Commissioner has given time for us to try and carry on this improvement journey within Birmingham City Council. I think it's also important to remember that this sits within the context. Of course, you've got the written statement of action, you've got Ofsted going back to 2018, so this is a very long journey. I think it's really good that we're trying to get some speed on this. I've got quite a few points. You may want to try and take some notes, listen to some questions and answers. Of course, you can come back to us later on. You made the point around agency interims, etc. I think it's good for us to know and keep track on the number of permanent, part-time staffs, agency, etc. I think that's something which is very important for us to keep an eye on, because of course that's where a lot of the money goes. Yeah. In terms of the issues, it's been mentioned in terms of the green paper. Sabeer's absolutely right. There's the template for the HCP. I think it's great that we're going to get a new HCP. That's very, very much long awaited and welcome. There's also possibly some new schools coming into Birmingham as well through the green paper, and I think that's something again which we need to keep an eye on. I'm surprised to say that that's not a risk. I think that's something which we need to keep an eye on, because of course that may have to change what we're already changing. In terms of the funding, that has also been flagged as a significant red flag. Of course, the interim funding for 1 year. It'd be nice to know exactly what we're doing, where the money's gone, etc. And you mentioned that there's some money left over in terms of dealing with the backlog for the HCPs, etc. But as Sabeer's also commented, it's about the frontline lived experience of what parents are seeing, not necessarily they're feeling the impact right now. It's important for us to keep them on that journey. Parent portal as part of Nexus, fantastic. It's also similar to what we've heard with 365 here at Scrutiny some 3 years ago. It's been often touted as the panacea, and I think Nexus is also being touted as something of the panacea, which is going to fix everything with data points, etc. There's a huge risk around Nexus, as you know, around how that's going to be rolled out. I've seen time and time again in Scrutiny these things being touted as something which will fix everything. 3 years down the line, we don't see it. 5 years down the line, the whole thing gets cancelled at huge amounts of cost. So I think it's important, again, for us to try and get a bit of feedback on that and see whether 365 Nexus is actually going to materialise. It seems a lot is hanging on Nexus. In terms of the HCPs, as you know, a lot of the issues we're finding with us not meeting the statutory deadlines, and that's where a lot of the money is going in terms of appeals. That's where a lot of officer time is being soaked up. So it's great that we're getting ahead of the curve. I think we need to maintain that journey to make sure that we don't again slip back into bad behaviours. And as you say, fix a car while it's driving on the motorway with things falling off. It's very, very difficult challenge. Releasing the phone tree, end of April, brilliant, long awaited. I'll buy you a drink if that happens.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah, please do.
That's bribery.
Yes, we've heard it now. So I would. I can't. I'm so sorry. And then the final point in terms of Nexus contracts management, I think again it's a risk with Nexus and that's going on. So it'd be nice again to try and get a bit of follow up just on those specific points. There's a huge amount of detail. And I think it's also important to note this objective 2, this is only half of objective 2. The other half we're supposed to cover in the next scrutiny meeting, which I understand may well be cancelled. So I think it gives an idea around this is only one of 4 objectives. This is half an objective. There's a huge amount of work over a long period of time. And at the improvement board, I'm always keen to try and get this done at speed. I think I understand that this needs to be done slowly, but in the 4 years that this is going to take, that's 4 years of kids and lives of young people that will not have the service that they are requiring. A lot to cover, but thank you.
I think just to address your concerns around timescales, although we're aware there is a long journey ahead of us for CENAR and it's not going to be something that we can fix overnight, the majority of what we're working on. So when we're talking about reviewing templated documents and changing how we communicate with parents, when we're talking about embedding Nexus, when we're talking about statically cementing our interim structure, we're aiming for this September. We're not aiming for 2 years away, we're aiming for this September. And right now we're on target for that. And I think it's important that we recognise that this is going to be a long-term journey, and it could be another 18 months before every family that we've got connected with the service starts to feel the difference. But there are families out there that are feeling the difference now, and we are really hoping that come September, you know, we're also working on, you know, the generic pieces in the background around how do we rebrand our service, because I think Senar's been significantly a dirty word for a very long time. How do we rebrand that service? How do we say, right, from September 1st, 2023, this is our service, this is what we promised that we're going to do, and that we were held accountable for delivery on that. So I do think it's a long journey, but I think short term we really do need to turn this around quickly. We can't afford to wait any longer. I will take those points and I will come back to you.
I'll drop you again.
Yeah. So I'm going to, Councillor Jenkins, did you have your hand up as well?
Just a comment, really. Just a lot of stuff has already been covered, but just on your comment around how young people are brought through the progression in terms of possible apprenticeships, and I know that it's something that has quite recently been introduced in youth work, the youth work apprenticeships driven through by the National Youth Agency. And, you know, I'm a great fan of apprenticeships and real opportunity for young people. So I don't know whether there's any structures in place that, you know, that could pursue that. But I would certainly think that would be a really positive move.
It's helpful actually, as well as already what Faye has said, in actually Objective 4 that we're bringing to that is also split into two. One is pre-16, and that so it's sort of we can get hold of it and get traction on it. One's post-16. Actually, Ilgan is the SRO for that post-16, and we very much have within that. And I think there are two things. There's one in terms of the apprenticeships, internships, etc., for young people with SEND. And then there's also in terms of staff development, which also includes recruitment, retention, etc. The very point that it's not necessarily young people with SEND, but it's young people who actually will be introduced or could be introduced to the whole SEND system, so they could become caseworkers as employment opportunities. So we've actually got it in different strands through the progress plan.
Thanks.
Councillor Morrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Faye, for the presentation. It was very, very constructive. Also, I share your passion for apprenticeships as well, and to echo Councillor Jenkins. One of the issues with apprenticeships is successive governments, and I've talked about this on scrutiny and at City Council, have just wanted to send so many people off to university that these days you need a degree just to do the most basic of service, whereas in the past you could just do it for an apprenticeship. So that really needs to be changed at national level as well as local. I just want to say, you know, away from the pantomime of City Council, I think we all really want to get this service in order. I think the work that you're doing at the moment is very constructive. I've said this to Councillor Sharon Thompson on Audit Committee as well. And you know, I really, really hope that we do actually get some change in the next year. The one point I wanted to raise, actually, I've raised this previously, is the timings. On Audit Committee, we had a spreadsheet which was like a service delivery. I don't know what it was called, but it's like a traffic light system. And I noticed that where we perform badly is always after the holidays.
Yes.
So after the 6 weeks in particular, every single September, I'm not sure about other councillors, but my inbox, I will get people emailing me about the SEND service being in problems. So what are we doing really to drill down on that? You know, do we need particular training? You know, teachers have training days. Do we need to get staff in to say, you know, this is what's expected of you. This is what needs to happen. So you know, what we're doing to kind of rectify that sort of issue.
Can I perhaps say,
yeah.
First of all, really important point, you will get that in every single authority across the land. Because if we actually think of SEND specific, virtually in everything we do, you would get that. Because you will get a lag in terms of things like tribunal cases, offers that haven't gone through in time in terms of September admission, or very badly, and we've been very open with you on that as a committee, we didn't even meet our statutory deadlines last year, so we were particularly behind in Birmingham in September. Hopefully not this year, because we have met our deadlines. You also get that sometimes parents need to do things, but you particularly get schools need to do things and they don't do things quickly enough. So we're working with Synco that if they are raising concerns that, for example, if I may say, a young person is not going to manage it in secondary school, it's no point coming to Senar in June to tell us like that, because that's far too late. So we're doing work with Synco to ensuring that that is brought forward much earlier. We would be looking, once we get an annual review system embedded that works well with the staff, that we bring forward or will have to take account of that, what is we call it a September drift. So things are done much earlier, so we could avoid as far as possible.
Thank you. Sorry to echo, Paul, is one of the other key things as well is that there's a misconception that the Senar service shuts during any school holidays. So what we'll get is that parents assume that officers are all off, and I will be honest, up until recently, that is a culture within the directorate as a whole, that officers tend to take their annual leave when the schools are not in operation, because actually, if you're the only point of contact for that school, then you don't want to be off the entire time that they're in operation. However, we're combating that and reviewing that by basic management structure of teams and capability management and proper holiday planning, so that there is coverage for the service throughout the holidays. And actually what we're planning for this 6 weeks of 2022 is that's our reset point in the red, so that we're ready for September. So we're actually already encouraging officers now to be taking their annual leave now in readiness, so that 6 weeks we've got, and luckily, I say luckily, because we've got a number of interim, they don't tend to take annual leave because they can't afford to. So it's really only our permanent staff that end up being off, but we are combating that as well.
Is that being communicated effectively to parents in terms of how they can contact you through the summer holidays?
Yes, that's one of the things that we're doing at the moment is a regular Senar update that we're sending out through Parent Care Reform colleagues. We're adding it to the local office website, it goes on the school notice board. We are communicating, and we will be after April, and giving them proper contact points, and we'll have a rota in place for that point over the school holidays, so that they understand that they can still contact the service when school's closed.
Do you not have a method of communicating with each family that might have a EHCP plan?
Yes, so we have all
so
of
you
the
just
data.
directly contact them.
Yes, we hold all of the data at the moment. We have to seek, at present, we have to seek permission in order to be able to communicate with a parent through email. So what we're doing at the moment is we're seeking all of those permissions, and then what we will do is send an update to those parents. But what we've done is, so the way that we've structured the service at the moment is you've got a team manager, senior officers, and then junior officers, for want of a better phrase. We are making sure that even if the junior officer is off, the senior officer, something as basic as putting it on your out of office, so that when you send in an email as a parent, you get an out of office. It's not just, I'm not in the office. There's a contact point for them then to go to. And this is where our Parent Link service come in as well, to bulk out that and reiterate that message.
Okay, Chair, we are 20 minutes over.
Yes, yes. Joe, I'm going to come over to you. You've indicated. Can I ask you to be brief, please, and can I ask for the response to be brief as well, because I am mindful that we are quite over the meeting time.
Always happens.
Joe?
Thank you very much. I'll be really quick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
first. I think that in part I've kind of listened to the answers kind of scattered amongst various individuals in their responses and their questions. But it was just around, I know that Faye had mentioned earlier about the change in the process from the decision-making panel to now reverting back to the, forgotten what they're called now, apologies, the SEM panels. And I was just wondering, because I know that Councillor Yip had mentioned about appeals and a lot of resource being soaked up in that way. But however, I was just wondering about young people that kind of got caught in the crossover between those systems, and if there's a targeted approach to address that. Sorry, I know it was really brief. It was obviously more to it, but
yeah,
as brief as possible.
Yeah, to answer your question, Joe, we are reviewing anything that we've got currently that's still left on what we would class our DNG tracker, and reviewing that and coordinating that against assessments and appeals so that we can make sure that we make those decisions quickly and there's not that catch up that hasn't happened.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Faye and Pauline, for attending and giving us an update on part of that objective. We look forward to getting the other half at our next meeting. Thank you. Item 9, work programme. So we've got the work programme attached. One of the things that Ilgun has offered today as well is to come back to us with further information in terms of some of the work that he's doing for the youth service. And so we can add that to the work programme if members are happy for that. Is there any other items that members would like to add onto the work programme as well, going forward for?
Chair, can I suggest that, given this is the last meeting before the elections, that we reconvene after the AGM when we know who's going to be on the committee, that we have an informal meeting to discuss ideas.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll make a note of what Ilgun's offered, and then we can
and the peer research offer as well.
Yeah. Okay. So the date of the next meeting, I sent out a message to all members asking for attendance numbers really for the next meeting, because I'm mindful that one of the items on the next agenda is about mental health and well-being, and that's a really important topic. It was raised by some of the young people today as well, and I wanted to make sure that we had a good attendance at the next meeting. The next meeting is only 1 week away, so it was next week, and the reason I needed to find out about if people were able to attend prior to this meeting is because send out for that was this week on Tuesday, so it was before this meeting, so which is why I wrote to all members. So we had 3 members who wished to continue with the meeting and 4 members who were supportive of postponing the agenda for the next meeting to go forward until June. And we didn't hear back from some of the other committee members. So as a result of that, we have taken a decision to move the agenda items for April's meeting to the June meeting, so we can get a fuller committee attendance for that because of the nature of the updates that we're going to have at the committee agenda. So the next meeting now is going to be on the 15th of June 2020 at 10 a.m. 2022. Did I just say 2022? Did I just say that? Oh, sorry, 2022. So requests, item number 11, request for call-in. Do we have any requests for call-in at all? No? Other urgent business. So Councillor Yip, you indicated that you had other urgent business.
I'm so sorry to hold this to such a late hour, and I appreciate we're running horribly over. But I wanted to raise the issues that with the Waitman's report, which was covered over in Birmingham Mail weeks ago. So as many colleagues will know, this came back from questions raised at full council and a report that was ordered at full council last year in 2020, where there was an independent report issued. All councillors received a copy in October 2021. It seems then either this was inadvertently or properly shared or leaked to press and the parent care reform. But in this report, there's a number of recommendations that's been made. And there's also questions around whether the timeline of the release of this report was done properly or whether it breached the legal privilege that it covers. So what I'm asking scrutiny in effect was if we could have a look at this and bring this forward to the next meeting. Now, ideally, the next meeting was going to be before May, so we can get everything done in this municipal year and then get the matter dealt with. But of course, if it drags over into May, June, then that may cause some difficulties. But in effect, and I don't know if you're able to, Kerry, if you're able to share the recommendations put forward, but all councillors would have had sight of this document. There's 4 recommendations that's been put forward by this independent report back in January 2021. I think it's important for us as a scrutiny to see what these recommendations are, for us to make sure that they are followed and also to make sure that they are fully applied and completed. So that's my request to scrutiny. The second point is, of course, answers were given in full council in written questions that are inaccurate, that need to be corrected. That's the second request. And the third is around issues with the timeline around how this confidential report was shared or otherwise. So again, I think these are issues which we at scrutiny properly should hear. Like to ask for this to be put in either for an investigation to take place or for us to have some sort of a discussion on this at the next meeting.
Yeah, can I just, so we will need to get advice from the legal officer on what you've requested. But
I've already sought legal advice and it's been cleared that I can bring some scrutiny. So that has been cleared by the chief.
Okay, well, we'll look into it as well. We'd have to look into it as well.
In principle, can I ask that this is agreed as the recommendations are brought and considered here at scrutiny?
I think I'd be more comfortable to have the informal discussion with members or whoever is going to be on the committee at the next meeting going forward, because obviously I can't speak for if I'm not the chair next year in terms of what's going to come to the committee, if members are happy with that. Thank you. Authority to chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone for attending. I apologise for going over, but we had some very interesting items on the agenda today, so I think thank you for the updates from officers as well.